Have you ever looked at a relationship from the outside and just wondered, why do they stay? Well, it's almost never as simple as just making a choice to leave. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the really powerful psychological force known as trauma bonding. We'll get into why it can make leaving a genuinely harmful situation feel, well, pretty much impossible.
So let's just dive right into the core question, right? It's a paradox that can be so confusing for so many of us. I mean, all our survival instincts should be screaming, get away from the danger. But with trauma bonding, the very source of the pain somehow becomes this magnetic force, pulling a person even closer. How does that work? Okay, let's be super clear about one thing. This is not love. What we're talking about here is a survival mechanism that's been kicked into overdrive. The brain, just trying desperately to cope, ends up forging this incredibly strong bond with the abuser. It's this twisted reality where the person who hurts you is also the person who offers comfort. So how on earth does a person get into this state? To really understand it, we've got to look past the surface and dig into the deep psychological patterns that actually trap the mind. You see, it isn't really a choice, it's more like a cage, one built brick by brick with manipulation and intense emotion. And it all comes down to this really cruel but incredibly effective cycle. First, the abuser creates this storm of fear and stress. Then, right when the victim feels like they're at their breaking point, the abuser offers a little bit of kindness, an apology, a compliment, some affection. And that unpredictable reward, it works like a drug. It creates this powerful hope that strengthens the bond every single time. This brings us to what's called the slot machine effect. Think about it. Why are slot machines so addictive? It's because the rewards are totally unpredictable. You pull that lever, never knowing if this is the time you'll hit the jackpot. In the same way, those random, unpredictable moments of kindness from an abuser become way more powerful and addictive than consistent affection ever could be. It keeps the victim hooked, always hoping for that next win. And here's the heartbreaking part. The mind, just trying to make sense of something that makes no sense, starts to turn inward. The victim starts to internalize the blame. They start thinking, if I was just a little better, or if I didn't mess up, then the abuse would stop. It's a devastating and powerful cognitive trap that keeps them stuck. But, this isn't just a mind game. It goes deeper than that. This is also a chemical process. A trauma bond can literally rewire the brain, creating this powerful addiction-like lock that's rooted deep in our own biology. So what you have is basically a battlefield inside the brain. On one side, you've got cortisol, the stress hormone, flooding the system during abuse, which puts a person in a constant state of fear. But then, during those moments of kindness, the brain releases oxytocin, the bonding or love hormone, which creates a powerful feeling of attachment. It's a chemical tug of war that leaves the victim feeling completely confused and deeply bonded. And this process basically hijacks the brain's command center. The amygdala, your fear center, is working overtime. The prefrontal cortex, which handles rational decision-making, gets sidelined, and the brain's reward system gets rewired to crave the very thing that's causing all the pain. It is the absolute perfect storm for addiction and attachment. So, to put it simply, leaving isn't just a matter of choice. At this point, it feels much more like a compulsion. The brain, having been rewired by all this trauma, starts to seek comfort from the very source of its pain. It just overrides all logic, all reason, all the advice from friends and family. As you can imagine, the scars of a trauma bond run incredibly deep. And they're not just emotional, they're cognitive. They can fundamentally change the way a person sees themselves, other people, and, well, the entire world. I mean, can you imagine living in a state of constant high alert, always walking on eggshells, your heart pounding every time you hear a footstep? That is the day-to-day reality for someone in a trauma bond. It's a life just consumed by chronic anxiety. And then there's this war inside your own mind. You have two completely opposing thoughts. This person hurts me, but also I love this person. Or I know this is bad for me, but I just can't leave. That's cognitive dissonance, and it is a painful mental tug-of-war that often leads people to justify or minimize the abuse just to get some kind of mental peace. Isolation is probably the abuser's most powerful tool. By cutting the victim off from friends, family, from their entire support system, they create a tiny world where they are the only source of validation. the only source of comfort. And that makes leaving feel not just emotionally difficult, but logistically almost impossible. But here is the most important part of this whole conversation. I really want this to land. The chains of trauma bonding, as strong as they feel, can be broken. Healing is not just some distant possibility. It's absolutely achievable. The very first step toward freedom is just understanding that this isn't your fault. This is a predictable, biological response to an unbearable situation, and it can be undone. Just knowing that is the key that can unlock the door to reclaiming your power and ultimately your life. And therapy can be a journey of total rediscovery. It's not just about leaving, it's about rebuilding a life from the ground up, restoring a basic sense of safety, rediscovering who you are outside of that relationship, learning how to set and enforce healthy boundaries, and finally, processing the deep wounds of the trauma itself. So, I want to leave you with this question to think about. Are the relationships in your life built on a foundation of safety or on a foundation of survival? It's a question we should all really ask ourselves, because every single one of us deserves to be in relationships that are based on trust and respect and genuine connection. Let's work on building a world where that's the norm, not the exception.